Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is post the Thanksgiving holiday, and today I want to cover a variety of topics. The idea of open rebellion in the hearts and minds of Americans in the United States today, and really the people, the good people of the world, in the international community. I want to talk about the real reason, the truth behind Obama's illegal executive order on immigration, and may even touch on a little bit of economics and what's happening in the oil markets, of which I did a report before the holiday break. A famous quote by American patriot and founding father John Adams was written in a letter to H. Niles, February 13, 1818, post the American Revolution. But what do we mean by the American Revolution? Do we mean the American War? The Revolution was effected before the war commenced. The Revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people. A change in their religious sentiments, of their duties and obligations, this radical change in the principles, opinions, sentiments, and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. End quote. And it all occurred in the hearts and minds of men before the Declaration of Independence, before 1776, before the war against Britain, the redcoats, and a king. And today in America, I actually think this is happening once again. I think revolution and the idea of open rebellion is already in the hearts and minds of Americans here in the United States of America that know that the President of the United States, through his multiple executive actions, namely his most recent threatening act against the U.S. Constitution in the form of executive order on illegal immigration, is rule by a king. It is rule by diktat, dictatorial rule. The president, he himself, said that the reason that he had to do this and bypass our branches of government is because simply the Congress won't pass a bill. He said, hey, I won't have to take executive order if you pass a bill.
And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
And the good majority of American people sit back and view this not just as an illegal action, but are very passive in their response. And the question is why? If millions of Americans view this as not just anti-constitutional, but illegal and the rule of a king, why aren't they doing something about it? Why are the American people so passive, fluoridated, mind-controlled by the mainstream media, allowing mainstream news organizations like CNN to manipulate public opinion? Again, if the masses weren't powerful, then news groups that are owned by the government, like CNN, wouldn't spend so much time and money trying to convince people one way or another. Convince people, for example, that president's actions are okay and legal, that have been done by past presidents, even though we know that that's not true. The actions of the President of the United States, Barack Obama, are illegal in every way, and they are the act of a king. And I think we have to think about, as Americans, what happens if we continue to allow these actions to take place? How many freedoms are taken away from us? And what do we get in return? The biggest things that we've seen over the recent years has not only been the gigantic transfer of wealth with the engineered financial collapse in 2008, which just happened to destroy the largest transfer of wealth that everybody knew was coming in the history of the world, was all filtered to the same banks that caused and orchestrated it in the first place, in the form of bailouts, 0% interest rates, stimulus packages, etc., that we're living through today, even negative interest rates. In Europe, we have the gross surveillance state that was leaked to us by whistleblowers like Edward Snowden. Illegal search and seizure. What did we get in return for that? What did we get in return for the National Defense Authorization Act, where they can black bag you in the middle of the night without judge, trial, or jury? What are we getting in return for the sacrifice of these freedoms, of the Constitution itself, what has made America what it is today? The reason that we declared open rebellion in the first place and declared war against Great Britain in 1776. When you look at immigration, illegal immigration specifically, it's important to note that it has nothing to do with the Hispanic community at all. Obama has no interest in placating or helping Hispanics. He has no interest in any of that. illegal immigration reform has everything to do with decimating the conservative base and decimating Democratic opposition. Now, we know, of course, that the two-party system is a fake, really worthless, useless system, that it really doesn't exist in the first place. What we really have is a one-party. But the entire agenda of Obama and his cohorts is to decimate any opposing opposition, even if that's Republican and or conservative opposition, if that's Tea Party opposition. It can be any opposition, but the whole idea behind immigration and collecting a new 5 million votes to the Democratic Party has everything to do with these new arrivals being able to vote Democrat, and in effect destroying any opposition to the president's actions, his acts of a king. You know, people, I think, are okay, Obama's constituents and supporters are okay. They seem to be okay, at least, with the actions of a king, as long as it's their king. As long as it seems to be working in their favor, their lives aren't affected. But what they don't see is the long-term trade-off of all these freedoms, of losing all these freedoms. You know, freedoms that we take for granted, like freedom of speech, our right to bear arms, form well-regulated militias, the Second Amendment here in the United States of America. They take that for granted. Illegal search and seizure, the illegal wiretapping and surveillance state that now exists here in the United States through these spy agencies and Big Brother like the NSA. They take all of this for granted. They think, well, you know, maybe it doesn't affect me. Maybe they won't target me. You know, I'm not out beating the drum. I'm not exercising freedom of speech in a controversial way, so I won't be targeted. You see, that's the same kind of mentality that people had with the rise of Nazism in Germany before the outbreak of World War II. It's why people that operate, namely by fear, joined the Nazi Party. Based on fear and the idea that, hey, if I don't ruffle the feathers of what's happening, well, I can survive. People go into survival mode. It's exactly what's happening here in the United States of America today. It is a rule by diktat. It is dictatorial tyranny being forced down and rammed down the throats of the American people. Back to the idea of open rebellion, the idea of rebellion being in the hearts and minds of millions of Americans. And I actually think this is taking place now. We see it specifically taking place in what some Americans call fringe groups, but what I would argue are really just the constitutional base in the founding of this great nation. States like Texas, states like here our home in Arizona, constitutionalists, freedom fighters, those people that value the republic, not a democracy, but a republic, a representative republic, our houses of Congress, our House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, branches of government, balance of power, a pushback against unilateral action, actions of a king. The Tea Party, conservative groups, even the Republican opposition is a threat to dictatorial rule. And it's exactly why the President of the United States, having orchestrated and passed dictatorially immigration, illegal immigration reform, and authorizing up to 5 million new voters, has just given the Democratic base more padding, has destroyed any opposition, destroyed any option of the opposite voice being heard, of constitutional principles being heard by the American public. And it is an extremely dangerous precedent in an extremely dangerous state of affairs. You know, we look at things like the economy, and I spoke about oil prices dropping precipitously, and I believe that much of that has to do with the war on Russia, the war against Iran, more than it has to do with Saudi Arabia, for example, just trying to snuff out fracturing companies and shale oil production here in the United States, of which the U.S. is now the largest oil producer in the world. This is much more having to do with the economic war, the moving of chess pieces, and the fact that we live in a depressionary environment here in the United States and in Europe, where we have depressionary GDP growth. That even with artificial stimulus, negative interest rates, and all of these bailouts and trillions of dollars worth of debt, we still have negative interest rates in Europe. We still have marginal growth here in the United States. A consumer not acting and behaving like they once did, having been decimated by past events like the 2008 rout that stole trillions of dollars from the American people in the form of bailouts and the engineered demise or temporary destruction of banking institutions, which have now been propped up as phony, faulty institutions, soon to go out of business once again. All of this, in my opinion, is connected. And the reason I'm pointing out, I think, economic conditions is I don't think personally there's going to be real effective change until there's a political vacuum where the people are genuinely suffering. When 2008 is magnified times 10 or times 1,000, when we finally have to pay the piper of all this cronyism, of all these bailouts, of all this gross manipulation, that is when the fire will really come to roost in the hearts and minds of men. You know, the smartest among us, many of you tuning in, are already aware of this, or already understand the illegal actions that the president has been taking, the anti-constitutional rule that is taking place at the highest office, at the highest law of the land. But it will take more pain and more suffering before a growing minority, soon to be majority, realize that they've been ripped off, and that they've traded their freedoms piece by piece, these constitutional principles piece by piece, till we get to the point where the President of the United States no longer needs any of them, no longer needs any of you to do anything, no longer recognizes the opposing voice. There is no longer any opposition in the United States of America today. And this is the dangerous path and the dangerous trajectory that America is on. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions on this. Please post your comment in the comment box below. Please continue to support our sponsors that help grow this platform, help continue the message of liberty and freedom, namely Amerigold. That's Amerigold.com. Click the link below right now. Support them. Take a look for yourself, folks. I've always believed that 5 to 10% invested in precious metals is a healthy diversification strategy for just about anybody. And if you look at the long-term historical trend right now, precious metals, gold and silver, are trading at a relatively steep long-term discount. Please check them out, support them, support us. And again, I want to hear your comments in the description box below. I'm Christopher Green, hard-hitting it in your face. Click those links below. Peace.